Good evening. I'd like to call this meeting of the York City Planning Commission to order. May we have a roll call?
Johnson,
Here.
Davis, he's excused. Velez,
Here.
Burgos.
Here.
Wolf,
Here.
Richardson,
Present.
Gaines.
Here.
It's noted we have a quorum. Minutes from the previous meeting, everybody had a chance to review them? Any additions or changes? Hearing none, there's a motion to accept.
Make a motion to accept the minutes.
Second.
Any further discussion?
Who seconded that? Nicole.
May we have a roll call?
Johnson,
Aye.
Velez,
Aye.
Burgos. Wolf,
Aye.
Richardson, Gaines. Aye.
Committee reports, zoning hearing board, everybody have a chance to review the email? Any questions? Okay, under new business, election of officers, I'll pass the gavel to the secretary.
For the position of chairman, are there any nominations?
That's not a nomination. I'll nominate Michael Johnson.
We have a nomination. Do we have a second? Roll call, please.
Johnson,
Aye.
Davis, I'm sorry, Velez,
Aye.
Burgos. Wolf,
Aye.
Richardson. Who seconded that? I'm sorry, Burgos? Okay.
And I will pass it back to the chairman.
Nominations for vice chair.
I nominate Christopher Velez.
Second. Who seconded that? Okay.
Any further nominations? May we have a roll call?
Johnson,
Aye.
Velez,
Aye.
Burgos. Wolf,
Aye.
Richardson,
Aye.
Gaines. Aye. Okay, so it looks like chair is Mike Johnson and vice chair is Chris Velez.
We have one more position.
Oh, secretary.
Are there nomination for secretary?
Sorry, I forgot about you guys have secretary.
I nominate Maribel Burgos.
I'll second.
Any further nominations? May we have a roll call?
Johnson,
Aye.
Velez,
Aye.
Burgos. Wolf,
Aye.
Richardson,
Aye.
Gaines. Aye.
And could you, for the public, mention
Yes.
what you're telling us?
So, the reappointment of the two that their term is expiring this month, Maribel Burgos and Matthew Davis. I got notification from Ricky that they didn't do it in the first city council meeting because that was all their new folks that got elected into those positions. So the third Monday of the month, they will go ahead. He does have the executive order, so they will go ahead and vote on that. And once that comes through, and I have the official paperwork, I will share that with everyone.
Okay, thank you. Jessica Fieldhouse. Hello. You're up.
Good evening, everybody. As Commissioner Johnson said, my name is Jessica Fieldhouse. I work for the city's engineer, C.S. Davidson. I am here tonight to review the proposed residential redevelopment overlay legislation for the Planning Commission. Before I get into that, though, I'd like to first talk about what my goals are for the evening. So first, what I'd like to share with the Planning Commission is how we got to this point and sort of the inception of this legislation and what our goals are and what we're trying to accomplish. Two, I want to put this into an appropriate timeline for the Planning Commission. And I want to be real clear here because I know there's been some concern because the draft of the legislation was provided in October. And it's been some time since I've seen you guys, at least since October. So I know that there was news today about Dentsply being purchased by the RDA. A portion of this legislation that we're talking about right now was developed to help facilitate a new use for Dentsply, but that's only about 20% of this legislation. Additionally, and I'll get further into that, additionally, I know that that redevelopment has its own timeline. That timeline is running independent of this legislation. My goal is to make sure that the Planning Commission, all of you, are comfortable with what we're proposing and you understand why we're proposing it. That either is going to work with the time frame of Dentsply or it won't. Dentsply has other options. So I want to be real clear. I am not trying to seek any type of a recommendation this evening. I am not even looking so much as for a recommendation next month. I think this is an important piece of legislation that requires its due consideration with the Planning Commission. So that being said, after I've said that, does anybody have any questions before I get into anything? No? In front of you, I have a draft of the legislation. I also have a set of informal comments from the County Planning Commission. There is also a half-page paper with a QR scan code on it. If you scan that code, and for anybody else here in the audience, if you scan the code that's on the little piece of paper over here, you can pull this presentation up on your phone. It might be easier to see because these televisions are a little bit small for the size of this room. So I'm going to run through the presentation first. Nancy, would you progress that to the next slide, please? Thank you. All right, again, just going through what we're going to talk about this evening. When this legislation was developed, we were thinking about the Dentsply redevelopment opportunity. We were also thinking about redevelopment opportunities throughout the city. But in addition to this, we were thinking about what can we do to help to do the city's part of aiding in the current housing availability and affordability crisis. So that's a lot of where this legislation is coming from, too. We are trying to mitigate this existing crisis that exists across the nation. People are having a hard time finding the type of housing they need for their own situation. There's a significant affordability gap. Both of those things are going on. There's not enough housing, and whatever housing is available is not affordable. We're also going to talk about a new planning concept that was developed, 2010, 2011, 2012, called missing middle housing. And this is another aspect of planning that this legislation is trying to get towards. And I'll explain to you what missing middle housing is. And in fact, in the presentation, Nancy, would you move ahead another slide? Another 2 slides. In the presentation on another slide, there's another QR code that you can scan. It'll take you directly to the Missing Middle Housing website, which has a whole host of other resources that you can find to kind of learn about what this planning concept is. So a little bit about the housing availability issue that we have going on in the United States. In 2009, we had what was thought to be about a 1.65 million unit shortage in housing units. And this isn't affordable housing, this is just straight up housing. We're short 1.65 units. Between 2009 and 2018, that number jumped to 3.8 million missing housing units. Since the COVID-19 pandemic, since supply chain interruptions, and then just the decrease in housing starts overall post-2008, we're now at about a 3.8 to 5.5 shortage of housing units, 3.8 million to 5.5 million shortage of housing units across the United States. That number for Pennsylvania is thought to be about 98,000 units that we're short. Shortage, again, created by the housing market downturn, supply chain issues, but the number one cause of the housing crisis that we have right now is because of traditional zoning. And how many of you guys have started to hear rumblings about how traditional zoning has started to impact our housing stock? Is this new? Yeah? Okay. So in essence, what happened with traditional zoning, and this is something that would be called Euclidean zoning, the counterpoint to traditional or Euclidean zoning is something called form zoning. But Euclidean zoning separated out land uses completely. Euclidean zoning also separated out housing types. So traditional zoning ordinances began creating single-family detached only zoning districts. City has 2 right now. And if you read the purposes of those zoning districts, it's RS1 and potentially I can't remember. RS1, if you read the purpose of the RS1 zoning district, it is there to protect the single-family detached dwelling, which doesn't sound like a big deal. It sounds like something really great, but what we know now, 70 years later, is that limiting land uses in our neighborhoods, limiting them to only the same type of housing or housing overall, decreased investment in our neighborhoods. It took away walkability. It limited the amount of public transit that we could implement, all because all of this separation of uses really just at the end of the day limited how densely we could populate our urban centers. And as planners, one of the things we know is that to create a walkable urban network, to create a public transit network that is utilized by all and not just people on subsistence living who can't afford a car. I mean, we need to move forward. We want our public transit system to be used by all. We need density in order to get more neighborhood based amenities and small retail stores. We need more density. We need more people walking around in our neighborhoods. The other aspect of this affordability crisis, or this overall housing crisis, is affordability. And while this legislation isn't necessarily proposing affordable housing, meaning housing targeted to people making below a certain income threshold, we're just looking right now, this legislation is only trying to create appropriate housing. So market rate, but we're trying to minimize the size of what's developed. We're trying to, so what we don't want to do is have new units created that are like what we have on South George Street, where they're leasing for $2,000 a month or $2,500 a month. We need small, appropriate housing units. We're looking at 600 square feet for a unit, 1,000 square feet for a unit, something that, you know, the young professional just starting out can afford, something that the empty nesters can move into. Just, again, trying to get more diverse types of housing units. From the affordability side, it's estimated that, and again, not that we're going into proposing strictly affordable housing, but of the, 10, can't read what I wrote here. So there are about 10.8 million low to extremely low income families in the United States. And of that 10.8 million households that's very low income, there's about a 7.8 million unit shortage to house those folks with very low incomes, which then starts to exacerbate the entire affordability situation. It means that some folks are paying much less than they need to be. Those units should be reserved for other folks. It's a very unhealthy, very kind of top-heavy system that we have right now with not enough housing and then contributing to additional affordability issues. So again, that's sort of the basis of where this legislation came from. And so when city staff, Blanda, Nona Watson, came to CS Davidson and said, look, we want to try and create a way to help facilitate redevelopment at Dentsply, you know, as planners, we want to think broader. We want to think bigger. You don't want to tailor your legislation to any one development or any one developer. So when staff came to us with this sort of ask, how can we help facilitate this? We wanted to take a much broader view. So not just how can we help facilitate redevelopment of Dentsply, but if we know our goal is redevelopment to housing. How can we facilitate developing appropriate, affordable units in more than just our economic center zoning districts? You know, we want to see mixed income neighborhoods throughout the city, and we want to see a more diverse housing stock in all of our neighborhoods. So that's a lot. Though the legislation was sort of birthed out of redevelopment in the employment center, we're really trying to accomplish growing middle housing opportunities and then increasing the density of housing where appropriate. The next slide, talking about possible solutions to this crisis, there are like a host of solutions. You know, we want to see more funding for affordable housing. We want to see expanded rental assistance. We want to, you know, prevent the loss of existing affordable housing by being lost through redevelopment efforts. We want to remove barriers to homeownership. And then lastly, the number one here is, and I can't see mine. Does anybody else see that? It says here, oh wait, why don't I just do this? Boosting the supply of affordable rental units in opportunity-rich neighborhoods. So essentially, that's what this overlay is trying to do. We are trying to boost the amount of affordable, not targeted affordable housing, but affordable to market rate housing, appropriate housing in our neighborhoods that have the most opportunity. So, you know, that's our RS2 zoning district. That's the UN 1 and 2. That's the Central Business District. Most of these neighborhoods have some existing residential amenities. They're rather healthy neighborhoods. We want to grow housing opportunities in these neighborhoods. So the role of zoning, again, I think I talked about this. Single-family only districts, separation of land uses, and just really in general, traditional zoning just overly favors construction of new single-family detached units. And that's sort of the way traditional zoning has been across York County, across Pennsylvania, across the entire nation. Some states are looking at moving away, even outlawing. I think California is looking at completely outlawing single-family detached only zoning districts, sort of requiring or regulating that you need to have a mixed income neighborhood with mixed dwelling units. All right, so then we get our discussion into middle housing and what is middle housing. So middle housing, and if you think of your zoning ordinance now, zoning ordinance basically allow for single-family detached, small amount of single-family attached. And for everybody else here, that's single-family attached is, it's an attached unit and the lot line runs down the middle of the structure. But middle housing isn't on its own lot. Middle housing is 2 to 9, maybe at most 12 units in a structure. And what's important here is middle housing is house scale. And that's important, right? Because walkability in a neighborhood depends on having a pedestrian scale environment. If you're walking in a neighborhood that doesn't have pedestrian scale infrastructure, you're walking in a neighborhood that's got Cobra style lighting overhead, very tall buildings, not a lot of, it's not necessarily an enjoyable walk. You're overwhelmed at times. So, and again, think about what an apartment building would look like. So middle housing is not a single family detached or attached, but also not an apartment building. We're talking about small house-style structures, and from the outside, they should look like a house. Nobody needs to know that that duplex is only sitting on one lot, or that no one needs to know that that house, and I think I have a picture of, it's a white 2-story or 3-story colonial that's out on East Market Street near the edge of the city's boundary on East Market Street, yeah. There's a picture of that in the draft legislation. That could easily be a 4-unit structure. And no one would know from the outside that that's got 4 dwelling units in it. It fits within the neighborhood, and that's the intent of middle housing. Middle housing is also seen as a benefit because it helps to support walkability. We're increasing the density. We're providing more foot traffic on our streets at different times of day. Again, planners use the term more feet in the street. The more folks that we can get into a neighborhood living there, the more foot traffic we have at off times of day, the evening, the weekends, and that's really critical, especially for urban neighborhoods. And we'd also be increasing affordability. A little bit more on missing housing. It's missing, like I said, because generally speaking, zoning doesn't really allow for these missing 2 to 9 unit structures. Middle, again, like I said, because it's in the middle of this housing stock. It's not a single family detached or attached, but it's also not an apartment building. It sits right in the middle of this type of housing stock. The next picture kind of shows you what that housing stock looks like and where it fits in the overall spectrum. And then the next slide is just a graph to show how we've changed as a nation since the beginning of the century to now, and identifies how much of that, how much of our housing stock used to be made up by middle housing, and what it is, what the share of missing middle housing is as part of the overall housing stock in the nation. And you can see that red line is what the share of middle housing is of the overall whole of the nation's housing stock, and that share has been dropping precipitously, really because our current zoning ordinances don't allow for this type of development. So when a house burns down, they have no choice but to put back what would conform in the zoning district as opposed to what it used to be or what would actually be needed. Does that make sense? So I'll skip through this next slide because I've talked about the benefits. So let's get into the overlay itself. So the goal of the overlay, as it says here on the presentation, is we're looking to encourage and increase the development of high-density residential housing in the CBD, the MUI, and the EC zoning districts. So in the overlay, you're going to see, and that strictly relates to apartment buildings, in the Central Business District, in the Employment Center District, and the MUI 1 district, apartment buildings are allowed at 90 units per acre. All right, that's a significant change. I'm not sure what the unit per
70 for the CBD.
existing right now.
Yes, and 30 for the other ones.
Yeah. So, and the reason, so the MUI 1 is primarily, it's an institutional zoning district. It's WellSpan Hospital. There's a smaller area, more centrally located in the city, off of Pine Street. Mike, what's the use? It's by the York Catholic?
Ice skating.
No, further, a little bit further, closer to you.
I'm not sure.
Huh? No, it's not housing. It's an industrial. It's a small little industrial area. When you're leaving like York Catholic, instead of going, I can't remember. Yeah. But that's the other MUI 1 district, and you're not going to see. We're likely not going to see neighborhoods built in this district. We're not going to see neighborhoods built in the CBD. We probably won't see neighborhoods built in the Employment Center zoning district. What we will see are non-residential structures that may need to be converted into residential structures to assist with developing additional units. What the overlay is proposing in the other zones, the RS2, the RS1 zoning district is not a part of this overlay. Purposefully done. This is an overlay. Think of this, if you want to, as a trial run for form-based zoning and a trial run for increasing density. As a trial run, I did not want to include RS1 in this overlay. I thought that that was maybe a fight that we didn't need to take on at the moment. So the districts were intentionally chosen. So, and they were also chosen based on opportunity. I know for a fact in the RS2 zoning district, there are several opportunities that the city has properties that they own that are big enough to put in 12, 15 townhouses, right? So there are those opportunities in the RS2 zoning district where, you know, we want to encourage the development of additional housing units. The other zoning districts where this applies is the UN 1 and 2 and the MUI 2. And what we're trying to promote in these districts is the development of duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes, cottage courts if they're appropriate, those types of dwelling units or structures that are 2 to 9 units in the structure. As you go through the overlay, one of the ways that we're trying to do this is by specifically identifying the lot width and depth, but also the building dimensions themselves. I think we're also stipulating a minimum or a maximum unit size. I think there's a maximum unit size being stipulated for the overlay well, maybe 1,200 square feet. I can't quite remember what I put in here. Again, all towards trying to get the actual housing that we need. And we don't have this problem necessarily in the city, but a lot of times I think about some of my suburban clients where they're getting a new residential development, but it's McMansions. It's a 2.5-story colonial on a quarter of an acre, and it's 2,500 to 3,000 square feet. That's not the kind of housing we need in order to solve this housing crisis. We need smaller, more manageable units that don't necessarily apply to the single-family homeowner. So a lot of this regulation that you see specifically for the duplexes, the triplexes, the fourplexes, the mansion apartments, the cottage courts, is we're looking to regulate that size of a unit so that we get the market rate affordable unit we're looking for. The overlay does decrease parking. A lot of this overlay is relying on considering the fact that there's available on-street parking. Something else that other towns are considering doing. We're going to minimize the amount of parking. We can't pay for the impervious coverage anymore. And we're not considering the on-street parking that's right in front of those units. It's an imperfect situation. Cities are always going to struggle with parking until we make serious moves towards public transit and other type modes of travel. And it's sort of a question of what's more important, is having more units, more affordable units, or more parking more critical for the city. I have my opinion. I won't share my opinion with you. My opinion isn't worth it. It's your opinions that really matters here. This would be an overlay applied to properties that are 0.5 acres in size or larger. The lots have to have been, or the properties have to have been vacant for a year. Determined as blighted by the RDA, or unoccupied and tax delinquent for a period of 2 years. So again, we're still limiting the application of this overlay. And then finally, the overlay would be applied via a conditional use by Borough Council. So applications to use this overlay would first come to the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission would determine and make a recommendation as to the appropriateness of the application of the overlay. That recommendation would go to City Council. If City Council were to approve it, then these missing middle housing types, depending upon the zoning district that you're in, or apartment buildings, would be a use permitted by right on that location because of the application of the overlay. And then what we do finally is identify about a little bit more than half a dozen common missing middle housing types. Again, just so that we can get them into the ordinance. Getting a vocabulary definition for a use is halfway there in terms of being able to see it. So we want to define what missing middle housing is in the city zoning ordinance. The next thing I wanted to go over, and I don't have anything more in the presentation, but I did put in front of all of you the draft comments from the County Planning Commission. I did also have an opportunity to speak with the city solicitor, Brett Flowers. In general, comments from the County Planning Commission were generally in favor of the overlay. You can see the questions that they asked here, and I think these are good questions and things for the Planning Commission to think about. So for instance, the Planning Commission is asking, why are we limiting use of this application of this overlay to a lot that's 0.5 acres or larger? Their concern is that we'd be limiting the applicability and the usefulness of it. I think we arbitrarily just picked half an acre just because we have to start somewhere. But given what the Planning Commission said, I did go back and looked at the lot dimensions that we're identifying, the building dimensions we're identifying. We could lower, the Planning Commission could lower that 0.5 acre eligibility to more like a quarter of an acre, because if you look at the larger of the uses that we're proposing, and that would be like a courtyard apartment. So courtyard apartments, according to this draft of the overlay, requiring 90 by 130 foot lot size. That's 11,700, so that's about 12,000 square feet. 12, 24, 48. It's slightly more than a quarter of an acre. But generally, I think if we're going to lower that applicable lot size, we can do it just so long as whatever we lower it to is enough to allow someone to use that lot to redevelopment for the largest of the middle housing types we're proposing. Other comments. All of the other comments about building height, second floors for townhouses, property eligibility, we can discuss. They're not super concerning to me, and it's whatever the Planning Commission would like to do. Similarly, with Brett Flowers, when I reviewed this with her this afternoon, she just wanted to be able to pin down whether or not this would be a conditional use or a special exception. We both agreed that conditional use at this point is the way to go. And then separate sort of administrative procedures would be developed by Brett for use by staff and others to help kind of guide application from a staff level application of the overlay. So in a nutshell, that's where we're at with the overlay. Does anybody have any questions, concerns? Again, I would like to come back next month and just pick up the conversation once the Planning Commission has had time to research middle housing, to look through the overlay, kind of kick the tires on it, and come up with really any concerns, questions at all. But is there anything I can answer for right now?
Could you explain to me the difference between a stacked duplex that you're proposing as opposed to what we're currently doing with divided single-family homes?
I don't think I understand the question.
Okay, the proposal is like 4 units to your stacked duplex example, 4 units in that structure. Right now, we're taking single-family homes and allowing them to be cut into 2, 3, and 4 apartments. So what's the major difference?
This is primarily new construction,
Okay.
and I think it's stated in the overlay.
So in other words, the example you're using is an example of a structure that could be proposed to be built.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. The only thing that this overlay is getting into in terms of conversion, this would allow by right, once the overlay was approved by council, multifamily dwellings conversion from another use. Mm-hmm. I guess it would be up to the Planning Commission, and I'd have to do a little bit more research. Conversion from another use, I assumed that meant non-residential use. I should go back and check and make
That's
sure.
what we currently have, yes.
So it's conversion of a non-residential use to a multifamily.
It doesn't supply into multifamily.
Yeah, yeah. So that's, but that's not what you were talking about. You were talking about single-family detached dwelling conversions to
Yeah,
multifamily.
I'd like to know the difference between this new construction and what we're currently doing in the city.
Well, that's the difference, is and the fact that what we're trying to do is facilitate and encourage the development of new multi-unit structures.
And then the other question I have, in your county comments, why require one parking space per unit for an apartment building, and they're proposing to a half a unit? Currently, and I'm just going to use a neighborhood as an example, where we've taken and allowed the conversion of single-family homes into multiple units, it does create a parking problem. So why would reducing it to a half a space solve any parking issues for an apartment building?
Oh, I didn't say it would solve parking issues at all.
Well, I realize that, but why multiply the issue?
Well, again, we're talking about new construction, and a lot of these designs include parking off of an alley, off-street parking.
Okay.
All we're trying to do is we're trying to utilize on-street. At some point, we are going to have to switch how we handle parking in the city of York. Everybody will, regardless. We can't manage the impervious coverage. We can't treat the stormwater. Those impacts alone mean that we need to try and re-envision how we handle parking. Lots of folks are moving to a max parking instead of a minimum parking. Lots of folks are saying, and again, it's a hard question. As a planner, it's easy for me to just say, look, this is the right way to do it and this is what you should do. I know that that's me taking a very simplistic view, and as planning commissioners, you have a lot more to think about than that. But essentially, if we keep providing for parking at 2 spaces per dwelling unit, we will never, ever fix parking in the city. We will never increase public transit. We will never move off of where we are. I think the right thing to do is to reduce the amount of parking that all of our uses in the city of York require. But again, my opinion as a professional planner does not mean that it needs to be your opinion. So I think that's what the Planning Commission is saying, is that from a planner's perspective, it's a lot more important for us to start reducing that required amount of parking. We can't take the stress on our roadways for traffic. We can't really afford to subsidize that land area for parking. It could be used for so many other things, and we can't maintain it. The stormwater impacts alone are going to become unbearable.
So how would that concept work with your cottage court? In the example that you have, the sketch you have here, I don't see parking provided at all.
It
would be street parking?
I don't know. It depends on how we want to handle it, but I would imagine there are designs for cottage court where the parking is off of it's still requiring parking, and it's still requiring off-street parking.
Okay.
So you're going to have to find it somewhere. Most of it's going to come off of an alley. So if we're doing 6 cottage courts, there are going to be 6 parking spaces, probably off an alley, unless it's going to be a front-loaded lot, which means you'd pull in off of the front via a driveway that would take you then to the back where the parking is.
Okay.
And these are only examples, so I do not want the Planning Commission to think that this is the only way to skin this cat, but I wanted to at least provide you with a visual of what we're trying to accomplish.
Any other questions? Anyone from the public that would like to make a comment or a question? Anything else?
No, just I would ask that the Planning Commission kind of think about how you want this process to move forward. So I'll be here next month to talk about the overlay. and to try and kind of get a sense for where your level of comfortability is. And as part of that, we'd want to be thinking about, all right, is it appropriate to move forward with adoption? Where is your comfort level with moving forward with adoption, and how do you think that process should be handled? Or how would you envision that process moving forward?
Do you have any idea if you want to include any public comment sessions?
We absolutely have to, but as part of the adoption process, we can do that. Again, it's up to the Planning Commission. If the Planning Commission wanted to suggest a separate public meeting to gather public comment before you push this towards council, there are any number of ways to do it. So if Planning Commission was comfortable, you can make a recommendation to push the legislation to City Council and recommend that City Council move forward with setting up an adoption and public hearing schedule, and public comment would be received then. You could also, as the Planning Commission, hold a period of public comment for this legislation. You could do it right before a Planning Commission meeting. You could start the Planning Commission meeting, we could adjourn it, do a public hearing, ask for public testimony, and then reconvene the regular meeting. So there are a couple of different ways we can approach that.
Okay,
Okay? All right. Thank you guys so much. I appreciate the time.
thank you. Yeah. Yeah.
It's got draft on it, but there are some that are over there if you'd like to grab one. Yeah, sure, absolutely. For anybody else too. And there's a link to the presentation.
We have a land development and subdivision, what?
No, we don't. They agreed, they signed the, time waiver, so, because for them
Okay,
to get, for CS Davidson to get the, remarks and everything would have been too close to the time, so they agreed to just be held over till February.
okay, thank you. Under zoning appeals, case 1-2024-Z-V, 1000 East Philadelphia. First, we'll hear from staff, then we'll ask the applicant to step forward.
So just one thing quick added to land development, please keep the plans for next month.
Property address is 1000 East Philadelphia Street, applicant Nam Hong, 5405 Rainbow Drive, East Petersburg, Pennsylvania. The owner, oh man, Denikio, I don't know, Acosta. Can I speak? Oh, okay, sorry. Acosta at 5 Jarrett Place, Lititz, PA. The zoning district is UN2, Urban Residential Neighborhood District. The summary, the applicant is seeking a variance to allow a neighborhood barbershop use in the UN2 zoning district. Variance appeal 1, the applicant is seeking a variance to allow a neighborhood barbershop use. Staff has reviewed the variance provision of 1311.10.d. Therefore, the staff recommends approval of the variance to allow the neighborhood barbershop use for the property at 1000 East Philadelphia Street.
Could you provide your name for the record, please?
My name is Nam Huang.
And could you tell us a little more what you're proposing?
Just putting a barber shop into the space at that property at 1000 East Philadelphia Street.
What would your hours of operation be?
The hours are typically 9 to 7, 9 a.m. to 7 p.m., sir.
7 days a week?
6 days a week.
Any questions? Anybody? Anyone else that would like to make a comment on this case? Any further comments from staff?
Is this the corner property? I'm trying to look at it on the map.
Yeah, it's on the corner of East Philadelphia and Albert Marley Street.
Okay.
So that's why it can be listed as a neighborhood barbershop, because it's a major artery. And if, I don't know if anybody remembers, at one point in time, it was a credit union in there.
Just the window that's on East Philadelphia Street, it's already open. The other ones are already boarded up, so I don't plan on opening anything like that.
Any further questions? Do we have a motion for the variance?
I make a motion to recommend the approve of the variance to allow the neighborhood barbershop use as defined in section 1304.01-4.09.006 at 1000 East Philadelphia Street in the UN2 zoning district.
Second.
Motion second. Any further discussion? Hearing none. Roll call, please.
Johnson,
Aye.
Velez,
Aye.
Burgos,
Aye.
Wolf,
Aye.
Richardson, Gaines.
Aye.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Case 2-2024-Z-V, 469 West Hope Avenue.
Good evening.
Hold on one, y'all. All right, 469 West Hope Ave, applicant Joe Musso, 43 North Duke Street, York, PA, owner Redevelopment Authority. Zoning district is UN2, Urban Residential Neighborhood District. Summary, the applicant is seeking 2 variants to decrease the required parking and apartment combined with commercial use in the UN2 zoning district. Variance appeal 1, a variance for the required number of parking spaces as defined in section 1304.01-03.001.d. At 469 West Hope in the UN2 zoning district, the zoning ordinance requires parking for each residential unit and for the non-residential use to be combined. Staff have reviewed the variance provision of 1311.10.d and finds that the property does not have unique physical circumstances or conditions that warrant relief from the requirement of 1.5 parking spaces per dwelling unit and commercial space combined. Therefore, the staff recommend approval of a variance reduced parking requirements as this property, combined with the other 4 single-family properties, sit solely by themselves in the alley-type setting for the property at 469 West Hope Ave. Variance 2, a variance to allow apartment combined with commercial is defined in section 1304.1 through 03.001 at 469 West Hope Ave in the UN2 zoning district. The zoning ordinance does not permit an apartment combined with commercial use in this zoning district. Staff have reviewed the variance provision for this property. Therefore, staff recommends approval of the request for a variance to allow 1 unit combined with commercial on the bottom floor to house the office for the 5 houses commonly known as Bobby's Place at 469 West Hope Ave.
Yes, sir.
Good evening. I'm Joe Musso. I'm here on behalf of the owners, Miss Bobby's Place, which is a nonprofit. I'll let the gentleman come up and tell you about it a little bit. I'll just give you a quick. These were 5-unit building on Hope Avenue that were built sometime back. The perimeter was constructed, windows put in, and the only thing that they did inside was just rough walls, no drywall, no utilities, no anything in there. And they sat there for quite a time with the RDA had them. And this nonprofit, which I will have you go through, made a deal with the RDA to develop them. Now, so far they have developed the first 4. This is the last one. And with this one, they're hoping that they'd like to put their offices on the first floor of this to maintain the other 4, the use, and have a second floor apartment would still be of the same use. But this would allow them to do that. We've requested a variance to the parking. This is on Hope Alley. It's basically an alley. It's very difficult. Now, there is room on the side of this building for parking. And the potential is there in the future to do that. And we would just like basically a temporary till we get to the point where we can do that parking lot over on the side and put a couple spaces there. So that's the basis of this. And let me introduce Zach and John and Seth King from Miss Bobby's Place. This is Zach. Just tell them what it is you're doing here.
Yeah, so first of all, I really appreciate your time. We're a family unit transitional housing for homeless families. We quickly found, I was a teacher in New York City. I taught at McKinley for 4 years. Just the tremendous need for homeless families, kids not having places to stay and things like that. Out of that kind of came Miss Bobby's Place and us providing transitional housing. Normally families are there for about 6 months to a year. We're partnered with Community Progress Council and their self-sufficiency program. We also run programming through our program. Our goal is to help them become self-sufficient and then get back into the community and rent, or hopefully in some cases buy. But this 5th unit is going to allow us an area on the 1st floor so that when we do our programming and CPC meets with one of the 5 families, we have a space that we're able to do that in. And also just networking and continuing to build up the community in that area, I think is going to be really important. Any questions?
Thank you, Zach.
Yeah,
Appreciate that.
no
And
problem.
just to dovetail in on what the presentation that was here previously, right across Hope Alley is Densify property, parking lot. So, this is an area, I think, that if that overlay district becomes a reality, would definitely benefit from that. So this is a good starter for them, and hopefully you have the plans in front of you that I have. You can see what the proposal is. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
The 2nd and 3rd floor, that's going to be a separate apartment.
Yes.
So on the 1st floor, when you're having meetings, there's no bathroom.
Pardon me?
There's no bathroom
On the 3rd floor?
on the 1st floor.
No, there's not. It's the 2nd and 3rd is one apartment.
So when you're having meetings,
That's on the 1st floor.
it's going to be on the 1st floor, but there's no bathroom in the 1st one, not even have a bath.
That
And you're
code would require that we have a bathroom in there. I don't have one shown there, but code would require that we do have one.
where's it going to go?
Yeah, when he gets to that point, the building codes official, they'll require a bathroom for that.
Probably right in that little corner there, directly above the other bathroom. Yeah. Thank you for.
And you don't have any plans for the basement? Basement looks like a full space.
Our mechanicals are down there right now, and that's what we kind of use it at. We're fortunate that they are dried in, it's Newport concrete, but right now we're just we have our mechanicals down there, and we want to make sure they're safe and door protected. We don't have any further plans at this point.
So there are families in the first 2 units, first 3 units now, and you're in construction on the 4th. Plans have been approved for that, and you're in construction. Is that correct?
Drywall Monday.
And it's all transitional, all of the housing?
Yes, ma'am, as of right now, and the reason this unit was important to us is providing a little bit of flexibility. The units are about 1,600 plus square feet and 3 stories plus a basement. And just kind of given the process that we've been working through, we found a lot of single moms and things like that. So as an organization, it allows us to provide for different people. 1,600 square feet and 3 bedrooms and 4 floors essentially is a lot for a single mom. So this provides us with an opportunity to have that meeting space to meet with them, as well as a little bit more flexibility in the families that we're able to bring in.
Any further questions? Anyone else from the public that would like to address this case? Any further comments from staff? Okay. Do we have a motion on the parking variance?
I make a motion to recommend approval of a variance for the required number of parking spaces as defined in section 1304.01-03.001.d at 469 West Hope Avenue in the UN2 zoning district.
I second.
Any further discussion? May we have a roll call?
Johnson,
Aye.
Velez,
Aye.
Burgos, Wolf,
Aye.
Richardson, Gaines.
Do we have a motion on the use variance?
I make a motion to recommend approval of a variance to allow an apartment combined with commercial as defined in section 1304.01-03.001 at 469 West Hope Avenue in the UN2 zoning district.
I second.
Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Johnson,
Aye.
Velez,
Aye.
Burgos, Wolf,
Aye.
Richardson, Gaines. Aye.
Thank you, folks. Mhm. Case 3-2024-Z-V, 750 East Princess Street.
Applicant Joe Musso, once again, 43 North Duke Street, York, PA, 17401. Owner J&N Property Investment, 750 East Princess Street. Zoning district is RS2, Single Family Attached Residential Conservation District. The summary, the applicant is seeking a variance for a commercial sign exceeding the ordinance size and regulation as defined in section 1308.08.A2 at 750 East Princess Street in RS2 zoning district. Variance appeal 1, a variance for a commercial sign exceeding the ordinance size and regulation as defined in section 1308.08.A2 at 750 East Princess Street in the RS2 zoning district. Therefore, the staff recommends approval of a 2 increase required size and illumination as the grocery store is quite large and is set back for the property at 750 East Princess Street.
Good evening again. I'm here with Miss Natalie Marquez. She is half of J&N Property Investments Incorporated, the developers of this property. I don't know if you were familiar with when it used to be PAX Market, much smaller at the time. I included some photos of that. But this is a substantial building, and a substantial investment's been made in the building. And in order to properly advertise and show this building, I think it would be appropriate to have the sign that is proposed. The property is located at the intersection of Sherman and Princess, which is a fairly busy intersection. It has some commercial across Princess Street, has one residential across Sherman, and has a church with a rather large sign, catty corner from the property. The uniqueness of this, let me just go back to my notes here. The building is very close to the EC district, which permits this commercial type of use. The building and the lot are both among the largest in the area. The lot is over 18,000 square feet, and the building is over 8,000 square feet. Location is a corner property, and the buildings are set back significantly from the streets, from each street. Both the size and location of the building make residential development of the structure improbable. And this area of the city is and has been a food desert. And this PAX served a purpose, but what what Natalie and her father have done with this building is to make it a real market within the city, and hopefully you can all stop in there because it is beautifully done. I did include some pictures of it so that you can see that it is as much of a supermarket type grocery store as most any that you go to in the suburbs, and it will be a great convenience for our citizens in that area of the city. Let me just have Natalie come on up and say hello and tell you about their.
Hi. Thank you for allowing me to come tonight. Yes, so we changed it as, I don't know, I know some of you nodded yes to PAX. It was a little outdated, over 20 years up and running. So we definitely wanted to make it more modern, especially since there is a lot of housings near there. So we just want to make sure that it's a place where people are allowed to come in and feel free to come in, but also with that modern taste. So that way, you know, it's not, they're not walking into an outdated place that makes the area not look as nice. Now they're walking into an area where they're always welcome, doors are always open, it's nice, beautifully lighted, and they just feel like it's a new feel to that area. Any questions for me?
I know that I personally have watched the progress over at least a year from of the renovations, and I'm glad to see that you've been able to complete it. And I noticed your grand opening signs. So
Yes, thank you. Yes, it was 3 years. 3 years of rebuilding that whole.
So it's a total of 3 signs?
Pardon me?
A total of 3 signs?
Yes, 3 signs. There's 3 on the 3 street sides of it. So you can see it coming up Princess and also, well, coming both ways on Princess. There's also significant parking there. It's lighted, and it's sidewalks everywhere, and it works very well for the business.
It does lighten up that corner.
Yeah. Definitely, thank you.
Are there any other questions or comments? Anyone would like to make a comment about this case? Anything further from staff? Do we have a motion for the variance for commercial signage?
I'll move to recommend the approval of a variance for commercial signs exceeding the ordinance size and regulations as defined in section 1308.08.82 at 750 East Princess Street.
Second.
Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Johnson,
Aye.
Velez,
Aye.
Burgos, Wolf,
Aye.
Richardson, Gaines.
Congratulations.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. Any items for open forum? Such a mum bunch of people. Nothing? We stand adjourned.